evening to everybody, and it's wonderful to see you all. I would like to welcome particularly loyal followers who have come back. We had a whole year of these talks up until the summer, and I can see quite a few people have come back again, which is lovely. Thank you very much also to people who've recently signed up. And there are lots of you here also who have followed a link from your Rotary Club or from your gardening club or something of that kind. And if that is, if you are an example of that, that means you probably are not on our mailing list. You will see the address of the website above my head. Speak Up for Our Planet, not your, not the, but Our Planet. If you go to that website and on the homepage, you will find a button which says get in touch or something like that. Click that and you can email us. So if you'd like to be on our mailing list, that's the simplest way to do it. I have some thank yous. Martin, who is from Norwich, who is putting his thumb up there, is the creator of this wonderful logo, which I think is really beautiful. It suggests speaking up because it's a little speech bubble and it's really, really identifiable. I've been checking it against all kinds of other things on the web and you can really pick it out. So thank you very, very much for that, Martin. I think it's absolutely beautiful. There's been a bit of upgrading to the website, including the logo. And there's an About Us page where you can see a little bit of detail about the people who run this Speak Up for Our Planet arrangement. We have a library which you can now get access to, but all of this I will email you about if you get onto the mailing list, and so you won't have to listen to all sorts of complicated instructions how to find them. On our events page, there's new things, including an event which is taking place in Norwich, which might seem a little bit strange, but we've been instrumental in helping to set it up. And from the events page in Speak Up for Our Planet, you can sign up either to go to it in person if you'd like to, or to receive the recording of it afterwards. Some really, really, really good speakers. I really recommend having a look at it. They include Jonathan Porritt, who wrote Hope in Hell, which is quite an amazing book. What else do I need to say to you? I think that's probably it for the minute. We will have a quick recap at the end of any messages that we want to give you. So, much more important than all of that, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Trevor Davis is a Shropshire lad, and he is a Rotarian, and he's a master composter. Did you know there was such a thing as a master composter? I didn't. He's the environment officer for all the clubs, the Rotary clubs in his part of the world. And he is going to give us a very short talk, which is designed to get you thinking about what questions you'd like to ask. So questions will be very, very much part of the whole evening, and he is looking forward to hearing your questions. After that, Ian Johnson is going to speak to us as well about no-dig gardening, which I am very much looking forward to hearing about. So we'll introduce him after we hear from Trevor. So as you can see, there's lots to fit in this evening. And I would like to introduce you to Trevor.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to begin with a 7-minute Pecha Kucha overview of garden composting. Nothing is covered in detail, but hopefully there'll be enough to stimulate questions so that we know that we shall be talking about topics that are of interest to you. I didn't ask you to switch the switch, Jane. The PowerPoint, that's it. I'm Trevor Davis. I've been a Rotarian for 30 years and I'm currently Environmental Officer for our district. My compost heap caused me problems. So 13 years ago, I took the opportunity to train to be a master composter. we stuck?
Yes, it doesn't seem to have moved on. Sorry, let me go back and see what's happening. Maybe share screen. It's not behaving.
Try the resume slideshow in the window under slideshow. Down, 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 left, left, left. Up, up, up.
What do you want me to do?
It says resume slideshow. Lower down there. Nearly there.
Up.
There.
Yeah, but I wanted to go back to the beginning because
No, we can go
Not
from
moving on.
there.
Try using the left and right arrows on your keyboard. That might work.
okay,
That's it.
right.
Composting is not new. References were found on clay tablets over 4,000 years ago. It was recorded in ancient Greek, Roman, Egyptian, and Chinese societies. Closer to home, it was referenced in the writings of William Shakespeare. So what is compost? Well, it's decomposed organic matter. All animal and vegetable matter will eventually break down into a compost. But there are things we can do to encourage this decay, and there are other things we can, other actions we can take to avoid unpleasant consequences. So garden composts help sandy soil to retain moisture and heavy soil to drain more easily. Adding to your garden is the most natural way to improve the vitality of your soil. We'll be taking questions at the end of this PowerPoint, but why should we bother to compost? Well, it costs £100 a tonne to collect and put compostable material into landfill. This comes out of your rates. Making garden compost saves petrol miles and packaging and produces a useful product for free. So that's why we should bother. There's always someone that says, I don't make compost because, and it might be, I can't get it to work. And that was me 13 years ago. It attracts rats, which it doesn't. I've got a leaflet on that. It attracts flies. Garden compost is not as good as bought compost, and it just is too much work. Two raised beds there. The one on the left doesn't have, or it only has a small amount of compost. The one on the right has an optimum amount of compost, and you can see the difference in the leaves there. There's lots of different types of compost bin. You've got a selection there. It isn't comprehensive, but it is a selection. And the one that's in the very centre is what we call the Dalek bin. Most of us use those. It's good news that these are available at a subsidised rate from most local authorities. So unwanted ingredients. Almost all animal and vegetable material will compost. We avoid putting in meat, cooked food, and bedding from meat-eating pets. That is because they might just attract vermin. And we don't put shiny cardboard in either because it's got a plastic coating. So nitrogen-rich ingredients. We need a balanced diet of nitrogen-rich and carbon-rich vegetable matter in our bins to produce good compost. Nitrogen-rich material, known as greens, is mainly the soft part of plants and includes kitchen waste and grass clippings. Carbon-rich material, browns, is mainly the woody part of plants and includes paper, cardboard, and prunings. Greens and browns should be added in approximately equal quantity. If you want quicker results, it's important to add the material in layers. And for even quicker results, turn the material into a second bin after 5 or 6 weeks, depending on the weather. This mixes the material and adds air. compost is basically animal poo. Have you ever wondered why compost is always brown, whatever the mix of the original ingredients? Compost is mainly insect poo, and a class of 10-year-olds who we often talk to love to hear this, especially when one of them adds, "My granddad says it's even better if you wee on it." And the better we look after our compost workforce, that is the insects and the bacteria, the quicker they will begin to produce our compost. To thrive, they need food, moisture, air, and warmth. So how can you tell when it's ready? Well, it's likely to be ready when it's friable and you can no longer identify the original ingredients. This might take as long as 2 years if you just keep adding it to the heap and don't work with it, or as little as 6 weeks if you've turned it and the weather is warm. Garden compost has some nutrients, but its main purpose is as a soil conditioner. It retains moisture in light soils, helps to drain heavy soils. Commercial composts and grow bags have added nutrients depending on the crop for which they're intended. You can do the same. So using your compost, you can use it as a mulch. You can spread it on flower beds, put it in patio pots, in potato containers, revitalize your lawn, and as an ingredient for potting compost. And there are things that we haven't mentioned: making leaf mold, mixing seed compost, wormeries, alternatives to peat, biochar, tumbler composters, hot composting, bokashi indoor bin, your collected green waste. But we can take questions about these, or you might even want to invite us back to do a comprehensive workshop. There's a Rotary booklet there which it gives a little bit more detail about what I've spoken about, and then there are some freebies which I should give the links to Jane, or I'm more than happy if you want to contact me directly. Jane will give you my details. There we are, 7 minutes up. Question time.
You really did it in 7 minutes. Well done. Thank you very much indeed, Trevor. That's great. So what we're going to do now, if you have a burning question, shall I stop sharing? If you have a burning question now, please write it in the chat. If you would like a bit more time to think about your question, that's fine too. Put it in the chat when you're ready. So we'll have a few minutes and then we'll invite Ian to speak, and then we can have questions on both topics. Is there anybody who'd like to ask a question straight away? Either write it in the chat or unmute yourself. Right. So Rosie says, should you add worms to your compost?
You generally speaking don't need to add worms. They will be there automatically, but there are about 13 different breeds of worms in this country, and what we need for compost is the surface worms, and they, if you want to buy some, you can get them from the fishing tackle shop, but they are what we would call self-regulating. If the worms are comfortable, if the temperature's right and the moisture content is right, they will breed. If they are not comfortable, they will try and escape, but they certainly will not breed. So you just don't need to add any, generally speaking.
We've had a comment, a little bit more of a comment than a question, but it's to do with coloured printing on the cardboard. Is it right that that's a problem?
It shouldn't be a problem. Nearly all inks now are vegetable-based inks. Some scientific inks might be mineral-based, but that it is such a small proportion anyway of the whole thing that it wouldn't matter if you did find yourself you've got a little bit of mineral inking, but the vast majority of printing now is with vegetable-based inks.
Oh, that's interesting, because I'd heard that too. Okay, the compost in my Dalek bin has been left for some time and is very dry. Should I add water?
Probably better to add a few grass clippings, but yeah, it does need to have moisture in it. My compost at the moment, because of all the rain we've had, is a little bit wet, so I'm adding extra cardboard to mine. But yes, you can water it.
Okay, I've got one more I'm going to ask. This isn't all the questions, there's loads and loads, but there's one more I'm going to ask before I hand over to Ian for his part of the talk. And that is, how do I get rid of flies in my compost bin?
Take the lid off your bin and they will disappear in 24 hours.
So they're not a good thing to have in your compost?
No, they're fine. All insect matter is good because they all do the same job, but some people are uncomfortable with flies.
Yeah, they fly in your face when you open the lid.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, where's Ian? I'll get my gallery open. Wave at me, Ian, I can't see you.
Yeah.
Too many faces. Ah, there you go. Unmute yourself.
There we are.
That's
Everyone
it.
hear me?
Terrific, yes. So Ian is, I believe, from the same part of the world as
Indeed.
Trevor. A very different kind of person. He's a professional photographer, so he tells me he's much more comfortable normally behind the camera, but now we're pointing it at him. So hopefully he'll cope very well with that. Why I'm fascinated to hear from Ian is that he created a productive vegetable plot out of an area that used to be covered in concrete. I beg your pardon, I'm getting my words mixed up. It used to be covered in concrete. What a brilliant way to improve your environment. So I'm looking forward to hearing about how that worked and what no-dig gardening is and how he made it work. So welcome, Ian.
Hi everyone, thanks Jane. I've also got a little presentation for you, so if you hand the screen over to me, if you would.
So you want to work it or you want me to work it?
If I pop it up.
Multiple participants can share, I think that should do it. Can you share?
I'm looking for it now, hang on one sec. Seem to be having trouble getting it up. Hang on one sec.
You've got a green share screen button.
Ah, there it is. Yeah, I found it. Thank you. Right.
Okay.
Are we on?
Yeah, we can see your screen, but you need to be doing a slideshow rather than showing us all of your slides at once. Further over to the right.
It's the right.
Not quite that far. The list of
Top
little
line.
comments, top line.
Not new share.
You've got file, home, insert, blah blah blah, and then slideshow.
Oh, thank you.
And then go
And
from
right
beginning.
over on the left from the beginning.
My technical support is having a cup of coffee in the other room at the moment.
Done it.
Right. Can everyone see that, I take it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. As you can see, I'm a Rotarian as well. In fact, it was Trevor who was just talking a moment ago who dropped me into this. So thanks, Trevor. I'm involved in a project called Green Rivers. It was a site that was handed over by a charity to a charity by Walsall Council, and it was basically derelict office space and a bit of a car park in a not very usable area. So we've ended up with about 6,000 square feet. I think it's slightly larger than that, completely overgrown. And about 18 months ago, when we started to get the children in, because my club's been involved in the maintenance and trying to help to look after the place. Obviously, with COVID coming along, we've had no children, but we've had a few start to come in now. And Caroline, who runs it, asked us if we could somehow grow some vegetables there so that the children would understand, because it's very urban, sort of middle Walsall. And she asked if we could provide some kind of a way for the children to understand growing flowers and trees, fruit trees, and some vegetables. So the way it was inherited, if you look towards the top, it was pretty much that. And that is basically built up of rubble, concrete. We've got concrete footings under there. So we had to look at it and decided it was, that's better, decided it would be far too hard to dig it up as such. And I became, through my daughter, who's a chef, I became interested in the no-dig permaculture movement. And we decided to build up rather than build down. And TK Maxx, I think it was, who came along and said, well, we'll provide the materials and help you to build what you want to build. So we've got that great big, I think you can see it on the bottom there, great big site. And we just filled it with compost and hope for the best. So my experience comes from 18 months of looking after the site and trying to find what we could grow and what we couldn't grow. We've had an interesting 18 months with the no dig movement. So obviously the main reason we went with the no dig is because of the concrete underneath the existing soil. Cheapness, being a charity, they didn't have a lot of money, so we can build them out of, well, almost anything. Some people use straw, throw straw down and cardboard and build up that way. So you don't actually need this wooden sides that you can see on these photographs. You don't even need those. So it's something you could look out onto a car park, and it has been done, and decide that you're going to have a sort of 4 foot square growing space that's built with straw, cardboard and compost. We were lucky enough to have TK Maxx come along and deliver a huge, great big load of compost. The other benefit is, as you can see from the surrounding area, it's very heavily weeded and couch grass, very difficult to get rid of, as some of you probably know. So we laid down 3 layers of cardboard underneath the compost. And so far, there's some photographs here. The photograph you can see now is nearly 6.5 months into the project. And that is the kind of level of weeding that we were doing, bearing in mind the rest of the site by this time was sort of 3 foot high with grass and everything else. And because it's compost used as a mulch to grow the vegetables in, it's very, very easy to keep weeding. As long as you tackle them when they're young, it's very easy to keep weeding and just to pull them out. And even the most persistent weeds, eventually they give up after a year or two. Their roots are so weakened that they actually stop coming back through, which is what we're starting to find now. We're not getting as much, because to begin with, we had a very high percentage of the couch grass in particular just popping up everywhere. So that was one of the benefits that we're starting to see now, is that we're not having to dig deeply to get the weeds out, and it's been really easy to keep it at that level. So I'll move on to some of the benefits that we're finding are that it's a lot easier to keep the subsurface moist, because the top layer bakes very quickly in the sun. It's a mushroom compost that had delivered, and it bakes quite hard on the surface, but it keeps the moisture in. So obviously, which is where the plants want it. So that's been a huge benefit. We've got 2 or 3 volunteers, but there's nobody particularly there who wants to start digging heavy soil. So what we fully intend to carry on with is building up each year with a 2 or 3 inch layer of new compost and mulch to build up, rather than to go down to try and dig anything into the soil, because it would be virtually impossible because of the site conditions. We were also worried about soil contamination, which isn't too much of an issue, considering we've literally got a barrier of decomposing gently composting itself, if you like, the cardboard that's underneath. On this picture, you can see some of the successes we've had. The challenges we've had on the larger beds, and ours is 5 meters by about 18 meters, so it's quite a big one. You will struggle to keep it remulched without purchasing anything from outside for the first year or two. One of the questions I've got for Trevor later is, I think we need about 1.5 tons to keep us going from year to year, which I'll show you a picture in a moment. We've built 5 bays for composting because it's a good site for that. So it'd be quite interesting to see how much we can actually produce ourselves and how much we'll have to buy in, certainly for the first year. But for the smaller site, you could probably produce enough yourself to keep it going. The plants have been really, really healthy, really healthy. We've been really surprised with how much has grown. One of the issues we've had is that because we're on concrete, initially we had what started off as 5 inches, about 125 millimeters for modern people, of compost, which after 6 months, we were down to probably about 75 mil to 3 inches. And some of the heavier plants, the potatoes have been fine. They've managed to spread their roots and they've been doing quite well. The carrots seem to have come up a little bit short because there wasn't the space to go down. But I'm told that may have also been our planting technique, because you had 2 Rotarians who are new to gardening, new to any kind of gardening. And as anybody experiences, probably looking at that photograph now and thinking, why is everything so close together? Because we kind of had the view that if we crammed a lot in, we get a lot out. Since then we've realised that if we don't have space in between, we can't work on them, and they basically overcrowd each other. But we've had some good returns. As I say, we're hoping within the site to produce. Now, there's one of our compost beds. We've now got 5 of those. And I would say we've probably put in about 3, maybe between the 2 beds, 300 kilograms, 400 kilograms. So I'm not sure what return we're expecting on that at the end of it. I've got a feeling we're going to need all 5 beds. We're going to use our own compost, and if we have to, buy some in to improve the depth of the soil and the quality of the soil. We're now working with some people who will help us to add a little bit more density and volume to the soil by adding things to it. We're going to look at crop rotation, which some people say is not necessary, particularly with a no-dig bed, but some rotation we're assuming is going to be necessary. We've had some companion planting success this year with marigolds. We've not had a huge issue with bugs actually eating our plants at all. We've had no issues at all with slugs, which is a benefit of the dryness of the compost. It makes it quite hard for them to travel. So we've been really lucky with that, considering that we surrounded the site with timber decking because that's all we had. So again, it all comes down to cost, but we've been quite happy with how that's worked out. So that it's 1-0 to the gardeners versus the slugs. This is some of the stuff that we've had, and this is one of our helpful little friends, the frog at the bottom, and they've started to come back onto the site from. There's a canal at the back of us. They've started to come back from the site that's adjacent to us back into, and interestingly, they've mostly started to appear within the no-dig bed area that we've planted. And I think it's because it's easier for them to grub around and find things to eat without sort of having to try and dig the harder soil. We've had a great crop of potatoes. At one stage, there was some talk as to how many varieties we'd actually planted because we weren't quite sure. Because being a weekend gardener, as it is at the moment, someone would go and plant something and someone else would think it'd be a good idea to go and plant something else. So we ended up with some very interesting conversations as to which potatoes are these. You can see we've had great success with the lettuce, and here I'm afraid you can see the urban crowding that we created with the potatoes, the carrots, and another row of potatoes about literally crowding on top of each other. But it does prove how vital the soil is. This was probably the only problem we had on some beans and peas, and that was an infestation of black aphids. And I'm sure there's plenty of people on here with more experience who will tell me how to deal with those. What we tried this year was neem oil and actually brushing them off with a glove. So we shall see. And that's me done. So I shall stop sharing that.
Wow. Thank you very much, Ian. I found that fascinating, particularly because you're so no holds barred and so honest about it. And you've told us exactly what went well and what didn't go so well. So I think there'll be lots of questions. I've certainly got some in my head. Let me open the chat box so that I can see what's going on. Okay.
Oh, that's better. I'm back on screen now.
So I'm winding down the chat here. Should you add worms? We asked that one. How can you raise the temperature in your compost bin? I think is the first question I haven't answered yet. So I guess that's for Trevor. How do you raise the temperature?
You can have a hot bin, which are quite expensive, but they are insulated and they will work at warm temperatures even during the coldest winter. What I do with my garlic, I line it with corrugated board before I put any grass clippings and cardboard in, which gives it some insulation. And even that, the grass clippings have got a lot of energy. And if I was to try and put my hand in the middle of them, once they've been in there for 2 or 3 days, you would seriously burn yourself. Somebody mentions putting carpet over. There's if it's an open compost area, you put the carpet over, partly to help to retain what's in there. It will do a little bit to raise the temperature, I suppose, but it also stops it getting absolutely soaked. And if it didn't have the carpet on, you'd have rain leaching out the goodness in the compost there. So a lot of old-fashioned gardeners do put carpet over, and they are quite effective.
Okay, thank you. So somebody has said, Ian, where did you get the mushroom compost? And I have a question about mushroom compost as well, which you might be able to answer the two in the same breath. Which is, are there some types of vegetables that don't like mushroom compost? So that one's for Ian.
We've had 15 different varieties of vegetable growing in our plot, and we've not had any issues. We did do a quick test when we went to ride, and we had a pH of about 7, which is fairly good for almost everything, I believe. So we didn't have any issues with it. There was a big issue with mushrooms growing up in the compost, and it's meant to be steam sterilized, so you have to make sure that it's a good company that you get the compost from. We've got 3 or 4 names now, and I'm happy to put those on a sheet or whatever for people, or on an email, and it works out at about 750 kilograms for about 90 £90 or thereabouts. And if you make sure this is the day when they're actually delivering to the West Midlands, there is no charge for delivery. Okay. So 750 kilograms.
Not in the West Midlands, but
no, you'd have to check obviously local area, because I can see we're all over the place, aren't we? Which is nice.
Yeah. So how did you go about finding? I mean, I guess what you've said is that you learned the hard way, which was the company that didn't sell very good sterilized compost.
Yes, we had recommendations from a few people. Locally, we found that the companies were claiming that it was screened to 10 mil, and when we had samples sent over, it was very, very poor quality. So you do need to be careful. The mushroom compost is one of the better ones, because obviously they use it to a certain percentage of loss of growth, and then they will steam clean it and sell it on, and at least you are guaranteed to get that sort of quality, the fineness of it. But some of the local stuff that we go, there's a couple of places down the road where they sell, they do commercial tree clipping and such like, and their piles look very impressive, but when you see what's there, so it's best to ask for a sample.
Yeah,
everyone we contacted said that they were quite happy to send us a sample box.
Great. Okay. If you have particular recommendations, if you email them to me, then I can make sure they get passed on to anybody who wants them.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
How did you find the drainage with the beds being on concrete?
It hasn't been an issue. We had to sort of stop the more enthusiastic people from flooding it with hose pipes, but in actual fact, it hasn't been too much of an issue because we've just literally waited until you can start to see it come out the side, and then you know you've done enough.
Yeah, sounds like a practical way of doing it. So, yeah, how many people have you got working on your patch?
It varies between 1 and 5, depending on the weather. Some
Wow.
people don't come out when the weather gets a bit wetter. There's a couple of hardcore people that come out, including my daughter.
Oh, right. Yeah. So but you need there to be quite a few people. So when you say no dig, you literally mean that, do you? That you just put more compost on the top and it discourages weeds.
Yeah, 100%. The whole principle is that you are assisting the microbes in the soil and the animal life in the soil to come up, take the compost, and they will break. Obviously not in our case because we got concrete underneath, but the whole principle of the no dig is you build up once a year a 2-inch maximum sort of mulching composting that will keep you going for the whole of the year. We've had 2 crop rotations out of one layer of about 50 mil deep. You don't need to, it doesn't need to be that deep. You're just topping up all the time.
Really
Can I ask Ian a question?
Sure.
Ian.
Hi, Trevor.
Hello, Ian. A number of Rotarians on tonight. Can you say what this does for the community? We've heard what you've done and how you've done it, but the community.
Well, obviously, COVID has restricted that a little bit, but we have had groups of children come in, and we've had them walk down the line of vegetables that we're growing, totally misname everything, but they point at rhubarb and say that, oh, that's beetroot, and argue amongst themselves. So, which is a good thing because they're having a conversation about things growing. Because unfortunately, the reason Caroline started this was, it sounds ridiculous in this age, but there are plenty of children that never ever see anything growing. They don't put their hands in soil. They have no idea of where things grow, which is a bit of a tragedy. And we hope, as the children are coming back now, to get more and more groups involved in that. We've got a few connections with a couple of schools who may be interested in coming out and doing the same thing with us. So they'll be growing and showing the children where they get the stuff from. We've also started to supply a couple of local charities with fresh vegetables. In fact, we've been that productive this year and not had enough charities because they've all been swamped. We've actually ended up with boxes of potatoes that we've been ringing people and saying, do you want some more potatoes? And no, we can't take them. We've not got enough people to distribute them. So that's been a good thing. So amongst my Rotary colleagues in Walsall Saddlers, they've enjoyed some very nice potato salads. But we've also had a connection with a local group that their sole charity. The reason their charity was set up was to put people in touch who have mental health issues, and we've had 3 people come forward who, the minute COVID is a little bit safer, want to come and work with us because they are stuck in tower blocks and they have no access and no understanding of how to grow stuff. But the thing is, with no dig, once you understand the basic principle, you can grow things on a balcony. You can grow things in a 2-foot square by 1 foot square and produce your own salads for the summer. So it has some great applications.
Fantastic. Okay, we've got some more questions. Trevor, you mentioned it was okay to put some light weeds on the compost heap, but presumably not bindweed.
There isn't a hard and fast rule, but a guide. Annual weeds are usually okay. Don't let them seed. Perennial weeds, it's usually okay to put the tops in, but not the roots. And something like nettles, the nettle tops are very, they rot down quickly and they're quite nutritious. So there is a guide. Ian's talked about his mushroom compost. My wife always complains that my compost shoots up tomatoes because tomato seeds don't seem to rot down. So, but if you're using especially the no dig method, and you've got a lot of compost there, as weeds come up, you can pull them out. It's not like pulling them out of hard clay soil. They just come out, or you can use a hoe. So it really isn't, usually isn't a problem if you just keep your eye on it.
Yeah, we had a problem with the seeds from melons, amazingly enough. But as you say, you can just yank them out. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
So another question here. Did you think about planting some plants? This is for Ian. Planting some plants with roots that could destroy the concrete and bring back some kind of field?
Wow, that's yeah, that might be a project for the future. That's probably beyond my current knowledge, to be honest. I'm sure there are things out there that would take the concrete apart, but that may be something further down the line. Perhaps that'll be another talk on here.
It'll probably break down eventually, won't it?
Yes, yeah. We've attempted to get some of it up, but there was that much of it. We've just left it in place because we needed to have things growing this year for the children coming back in September.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, there's a word here I can't read. Is there any chance of leachate water of compost may add to underground water table? Does Nagiyota want to explain that?
I can understand what she's getting at. No more so than if you hadn't got anything planted there at all. And anything that leaches out of compost is natural, organic anyway, so that there's no problem there.
Okay.
Robert's got his hand up. No.
Go for it. Who's got his hand up?
Robert had. It's top right in my screen.
It's not in mine. Speak, Robert. No, perhaps he didn't.
You're muted, Robert.
Just would like to say about my experience with my compost bin. I come from a warm temperature, and usually it takes 4 to 6 months for it to be ready. I'm the fellow who goes from the kitchen to the bin every day. And it's a great experience for me because I can see the coloring change. I can see the snails and the mosquitoes and the flies, and the pile goes down. But I have a gardener who uses my compost, and he always says what a good quality it is. And I usually have this twice a year. Usually I use my compost twice a year. It helps me with my orange trees and lemon trees, and the surplus I put in the soil for my plants. And I was very pleased to listen to you speaking about these bins, because at least I know that I'm doing something correctly.
Very much so. Thank you. So we have a question from Australia. Our sewage system in Australia is a worm farm tank and results in grey water recycling. How come composting human and dog poo is not advisable? Thank you.
If you're asking me, it is viable. I've been speaking about making garden compost at home. And if you use animal matter, cooked foods, you're likely to attract vermin, you're likely to attract foxes, you're likely to attract rats, likely to attract pigeons. And I'm not allowed to encourage anyone to do anything which might put them off composting for the rest of their lives. So we say no meat, no cooked foods, just pure uncooked vegetables. So that's the reason. But worms are remarkable creatures, absolutely remarkable creatures. I received a webinar recorded this week of worm farms, and they can purify the water. because apparently anything that goes to the worm's gut comes out absolutely clean. But that's a different subject altogether, but it is very, very interesting.
So lots of worms in your compost is good.
Absolutely good, and that's what I said. If your compost heap is right and they're comfortable, you won't ever need to add any more worms. They will procreate naturally.
That's definitely my experience as well. Okay, Michael Rye has raised his hand. Please unmute yourself and speak.
Yes, I was listening with great interest, really, about composting and so on. Just a question, would it not be better to go to the local farmer and get everything from the farmyard and put it on a lot quicker, a lot more nutrients in it?
Well, I would have thought the farmer would want to use his own material on his own land.
You don't know until you ask.
No, I absolutely no reason why you shouldn't ask. And there are lots of people that keep horses, and some of them I understand have a bit of a problem getting rid of the horse manure. Horse manure is one of the greens, and it will need cardboard or shredded paper or something like that to go with. But you can put it into your compost bin. If you put it on too early, it'll probably burn the seedlings or whatever. It needs to be, I'm trying to think of the word, but not using it too fresh.
I tell you what, I have a beautiful display of roses.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I suppose I should say we have custard on ours.
my system is telling me somebody else has their hand up, but I can't see who it is. So whoever it is, could they unmute themselves and speak? Maybe my system's lying to me. Sometimes they do. Okay, so Ian, can you say some more about how you create sides to the plots? You clearly had wooden sides, but you mentioned other ways to contain your compost. What happens as your levels increase year by year?
Well, then answer the latter part of the question first. The levels don't increase because the whole principle is that the microbes and the organisms within the soil drag it down, eat it, and you'd be surprised how quickly, say 125 mil of compost drops down by 50% by the end of the year. And that's the only reason really that you need to keep topping it up with more compost, either created by your own hand or by your own work or by delivery. The wooden sides, we had wooden sides, and you have to be careful because the railway sleepers that they sell, especially the genuine older railway sleepers, have been impregnated quite often with deadly chemicals, and there is a problem with leaching. So if you do use those, I would suggest that you cover them with some kind of plastic to prevent the compost coming directly into contact. Even tannalized timber that you can get from the builder's merchant, which the decking, which a lot of people would use, does have a degree of chemical, quite toxic, some of them, including arsenic, sprayed into them to stop the rot that they don't want to occur. So you do need to be careful. Normal softwood will last outside for about 5 years, so it's not expensive to replace. But one of the easiest things to do is literally to put down, say, a 4-foot square of cardboard, and then on top of that you can put straw and your compost, another layer of cardboard. I mean, Trevor's mentioned carpets for the compost. Well, so long as it's not a man-made fibre, a lot of people actually put down pieces of carpet, because that will eventually degrade and things will grow through the carpet if it's a natural fibre. So that there is no need to use the wooden sides. We use them because we have children running onto the site and we don't want everything to end up everywhere. But you don't actually need to do that at all. There are some very good, if you go on to a couple of the YouTube videos, Hugh Richards has some sites that he's literally grown with straw and cardboard, that there is no need for the wood. That is more for our convenience than anything.
Okay, Thank you very much. We've got lots more questions. Ian says he has no problems with slugs under the no-dig program. Was this always the case after rain or watering? If so, can he explain why?
I'm going to stick my neck out and say that, well, first of all, it is the case that we've suffered no damage really from slugs. Unlike here at home where we have a huge problem with them. And I can only put that down to the fact that the structure of the compost is the equivalent of walking on gravel to us. And so I don't think they can't be bothered to travel across it, I think is the honest answer.
Sounds good. Trevor, previously we've had mice in our compost. How do you keep them out?
Almost every talk that I do, somebody will bring up the subject of rats, and that's what I've concentrated on. The one thing I could say, if you've got mice, you won't have rats, and if you've got rats, you won't have mice. But I don't think that the questioner would want to swap one for the other. It wouldn't worry me too much if I got mice in my compost, because of all the wildlife, insects, little animals and so on, they all help to make the compost. But what you could do, and what I've done in mine, is just put a mouse trap or 2 mouse traps on top of the compost in the bin, and you'll find either that they'll try and eat the cheese and the mousetrap will snap and it'll frighten them off and they won't come back, or you'll find you've got a dead mouse in there. You can get humane, can't you? Humane traps now, I think, where you could take them out and put them in neighbour's garden.
Yeah. So basically you're saying don't worry about them. If
it wouldn't worry me, but if it does worry anyone else, then that would be the one. And I see someone's put get a cat. Well, yeah, in my rat leaflet, I say get a cat or a dog.
Yeah, a cat bring them into the house, in my experience.
Yeah. Well, I need to play with.
Okay, it's 25 past, so I'm going to start the wrapping up process. I'm sure that if people have questions that they want to ask, that they forgot to ask or whatever, that we would be able to prevail upon Trevor and Ian to answer them by email at some point. So first of all, let's give both of our speakers a round of applause, even if it's a silent one. Thank you ever so much. And I thought there'd be lots of questions, and indeed there were. And I think probably lots of people will think of some more. Couple of things now. We'd like to just give you a brief introduction to what the next talk is going to be about. And we're also keen to try and instigate a habit of having some small group chats about previous talks. So in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to have just a handful, 5-6 people talking to each other about what they learned from this talk this evening and what they feel they want to take out of it and so forth. I've got a few volunteers already, but if anybody would feel that they would enjoy doing that, please email me. And you know how to email me. There's the website. Go to the main front page and click on get in touch. And then I've got a very quick poll that I would like to ask you to do. So just in the last 5 minutes, Rosie, would you like to speak about the next speaker?
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Rosie, I'm part of the SUFOP team, the Speak Up team. Next session that we're having is on the 13th of October. And we're going to go from all this natural technology, if you like, of the garden into the new smart technologies that go with the world of electricity in the future. And the talk was born of someone saying, I've got this smart meter, what on earth is it doing for me? And so we're delighted to come and tell us about the future technologies in the electricity that we're going to have in our homes that are going to let us talk to the grid, to the distribution, to the grid. And what's that going to mean for us? How does it help us go low carbon? How does it help us have a more economic transition into the future? So I'm absolutely delighted. We've got a lady called Claire Duffy. She's one of the senior leadership team of ESB Networks. Now, ESB Networks, if you're not been to Ireland, ESB Networks is the grid owner, and they work the distribution grids as well in Ireland. And Claire is the person in their senior leadership team who is responsible for all the transition to a low carbon energy system by enabling the heat transport initiatives, etc., that involve us talking to the grid. So she's all about enabling electric car charging points, domestic heat pumps. She's the lady who's in charge of rolling out things like how are solar panels going to connect up? How are we going to export to the grid and import from the grid? What are these smart meters doing? How do they help us manage this change where we're both generating potentially and using electricity? And one of the things she's going to talk about is the Internet of Things. She's going to talk about the batteries and the electric vehicles that you're probably hearing about. And Claire's going to introduce a concept of how we can be an active electricity and energy citizen, which I think is a lovely concept of how do we run our houses to enable the grid to run renewables and run all the things that those of us who want a low carbon future want to see, and how do our actions affect the grid and the grid affect us. So if you're interested in all those sorts of things, 13th of October, and I know Claire personally, she's a superb speaker.
Many thanks. That sounds a lot different from today's talk, but equally interesting and important, because how electricity is going to go in the future